soft tissue. Now in this talk, when I say soft tissue, I'm not talking about soft body parts that turn to stone. I'm talking about original biomolecules like protein, DNA, that is still there, red blood cells, blood vessels still in a dinosaur bone. That tells you that these things cannot be millions of years old. But let's start with now you know my favorite volcano, right? But do you know my favorite movie?
Jurassic Park.
That's right, Jurassic Park. So when I was young, that was my favorite movie, Jurassic Park, right? And so, but now of course they make it even bigger in the Jurassic World series. And of course, Jurassic World fans, where are you? Anyone there? Okay, in the second series, you saw this dinosaur. What's the name of this dinosaur? Anybody know? Well, who said Pyroraptor there? That's right, I'm amazed. Pyroraptor, that's right. That's Pyroraptor. And if you haven't seen the movie, this huge creature, really fierce, was chasing these two people here, right? In the snow, icy landscape, chased after them, frozen lake, broke into the ice, swam under the ice, chasing them from under the ice. And then they circled them under the ice, pop up, jump the air, glide, and chase after them. Wow, very exciting. Pyroraptor, huge creature. The real Pyroraptor is that size. That's Pyroraptor. Not the whole thing, the white bones. See that? And from these few bones, they made a whole feathered dinosaur there. No feathers were found in this creature. Sticks to people's mind, right? When people think about dinosaurs, they go to libraries, universities, college, books, museums. What do they tell you about dinosaurs? Millions and millions of years ago, evolution, right? So when you ask somebody about dinosaurs, you ask them, what comes to mind when you think about dinosaurs? What do they say? What do they image? What do they have in their mind? They have this image of fierce creatures, strange-looking plants on one side, volcanoes on the other side, right? Why do they have that image in your mind? That's right. Whether you realize it or not, you are already subconsciously influenced by your culture. If you believe in the Big Bang, the universe 13.7 billion years ago, the planets formed. That's called cosmic evolution, forming of the planets. It cooled down, primordial soup, and the first life came about from non-life. That's called chemical evolution. And then from that one single cell, it evolved into all other life forms today. That's called biological evolution. Start with the Bible with a very different history. The Bible says God created the world about 6,000 years ago, created man on the sixth day. We covered that this morning. Later on, there was the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve fell into sin, and when they sinned, they brought sin, death, and suffering into this world. Then there was the worldwide flood in Noah's day that formed most of the fossils that we see today. And after the flood, the nations gathered together and got confused the languages, and they spread out during the Tower of Babel. That's where we get the different people groups, and people spread out all over the world. Very different picture of history. So at the end of the day, why talk about dinosaurs? The same reason we talked about creation earlier on. Pull back the curtains, it boils down to this one question. What is your authority? Do you believe the word of God? Dinosaurs have been used to promote the idea of evolution, perhaps more than any other creature that I know. But at Creation Ministries, we call dinosaurs missionary lizards. Because we believe you can train yourself in this area and use this as a way to engage your friends in the conversation. You're going to see that the evidence points to the Bible much better. But what's a dinosaur? Is this a dinosaur? Is this a dinosaur? Well, not really. These are dino-like, but they are not dinosaurs. Because we call that marine reptiles and flying reptiles. The word dinosaur refers strictly to a land creature. So what makes a dinosaur different from a crocodile? Think about the anatomy. The crocodile, how does it walk? The arm come out from the side and kind of waddles like that, right? Dinosaur is different. It has a unique hip anatomy that allows the limbs to grow straight down so it walks in an upright position. Really, it's three bones coming together to form a big hole. And then it's like a ring, okay, like a ring of my wedding. Oops. Okay, a wedding ring. It's just a big hole, the hip pocket. And dinosaur, the thigh bone, the femur comes up like that, so it walks in an upright position. So what's a dinosaur? A dinosaur is a land reptile that walks in an upright position because it has a unique hip anatomy. Okay, let's hope this works. So let's think about dinosaurs starting with the Bible. Oh no. Okay, now it works. Okay. So let's start with the Bible. T-Rex, the teeth is really sharp, 6 inches long. I mean, Spinosaurus tooth out there is quite big too, right? But T-Rex bigger, 6 inches long. What was its original diet? Plant eater, meat eater, or plant and meat eater? Who says plant? Who says meat? Plant and meat? Remember what we saw this morning at the beginning? Eating plants. Genesis 1:30. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the ground, on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. They were eating plants. Creatures only began to eat one another after sin entered the world. But the original diet was plants. God saw all he had made, and it was very good. So I know what all of you are thinking. Oh, come on, look at these fangs. Look at these claws. You think we're just supposed to eat honey and berries? How do you answer something like that? Let's look at bears. Polar bear, grizzly bear. Okay, what does the polar bear eat? Anyone? Seals. That's why meat, right? It's a meat diet. What about a brown bear, a grizzly bear? What? Fish, berries, so some plants, some meat, sometimes hunt something. What about a sun bear? Black bear? Berries, they eat lots of termites. They dig it up. Occasionally, they may hunt a deer or two, but mostly plants. What about the panda? Bamboo, that's right. Spectacled bear, now it gets really hard. Found in South America, eats both meat and plants, but only 6% of its diet is meat. It's mostly plant. It eats cactus, eats fruits, palm leaves, and orchids. Strange diet. And the sloth bear, what's that? He eats sloths? Good guess. No, actually, it's not. This is actually India, and it eats mostly termites and ants, and tropical fruits, sugar canes, mangoes. I love that, But let's look at the skulls. Look at that. All of them have the same strong, sharp teeth, strong jaw. You may have heard of the term adaptation. Here's another term for you. Acceptation, what is that? That's the idea that the same creature can use the same tools for multiple purposes. The strong jaws that's good for crushing the head of a seal is going to be good for crushing tough plant material. Imagine if you have to eat a melon or something like that. The same claws that's good for clubbing the head of a seal is good for collecting berries of a tree, for digging into roots and things like that. So the same creature can use the same tools for multiple purposes. You can't just say, hey, look, you have sharp teeth, therefore we eat meat. That just gives you an educated guess. But the Bible is clear at the beginning, they were only eating plants. And later on, some of them, because of some of this, give them advantage in hunting, they might actually have eaten meat and things like that. Although all bears have teeth designed for eating meat, their diet mainly consists of plants. So if the fall did not happen, something like that could have been very possible. In fact, the meat-eating dinosaurs, these are the theropods, the big legs, small arms, right? The theropods, we know from science that slightly more than half of them actually ate plants. So you say, okay, if dinosaurs were created to eat plants, later on some of them begin to eat meat. How do we know? Well, sometimes we can look at the bones and we find teeth marks. Right? So you can look at the shape, the size of the teeth marks, the spacing. You can actually identify the species that made those marks. Or like you saw this one earlier today, the T-Rex tooth stuck in between the duck-billed dinosaur, right? Two bones fusing its joints together. That tells you at the time of the flood, creatures were eating one another. Another way, if you go to the fossil display out there, you'll find two pieces of dinosaur dung. And we can tell what the dinosaur ate by looking at the dung. And sometimes it contains bone fragment. But just to sidetrack a bit, when I was younger, I would be a bit mischievous. I would take a piece of dinosaur dung. I wouldn't tell my friends what it is. They say, what's that? I say, smell, taste it, guess what it is. Please don't do that to your friends. But when you look at it under a microscope, you see what it is. But you also find grass. The huge titanosaurs in India were actually eating rice. So I always find it kind of funny, but they were eating rice. And that was shocking for evolutionists. Because for many years, evolutionists used to say that grass did not even come to existence until 10 million years after dinosaurs died out. But what did they find in dinosaur droppings? Grass. And so in a period of slightly over 10 years, they had to throw out the evolutionary model for the origin of grass 3 times, doubling in age. So they more than doubled in age because they keep finding things in dinosaur droppings that shouldn't have been there. And so it says here, depicting dinosaurs munching on grass was considered by experts to be as foolish as showing prehistoric humans hunting dinosaurs with spears. Yet the science often frustrate the evolutionary attempts to explain these things. So they keep extending the date forward. You see, every time they find something that shouldn't be there, they always have to match that to the older date. So it goes back further and further back in time. So in Creation Magazine, we write grass-eating dinosaurs, a time travel problem for evolution. But in the Bible, after the flood, can you think of an animal that would be really huge, that eats grass like an ox? I'll cover this more, but could it be maybe something like behemoth? Behold, behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass. Behemoth more later. Yet if you go to some museums around the US today, they still tell you grass did not yet exist in the time of dinosaurs. Another way we know what they eat is not just from the droppings, but sometimes the bones are so well preserved, we can even see what it eats in its stomach, its last meal. So for example, this dinosaur actually ate 3 birds. You say, wait a minute, I thought according to evolution, dinosaurs evolved into the modern day birds. Yet, I put these dates here, because this is, I don't believe these dates, all right? But these are evolutionary dates. I put this here because this is twice as old as when they said dinosaurs died out. And the line that leads to modern day birds. This is way before that. And so what do evolutionists do? This bird, which is bird-like in every way, they call that a feathered dinosaur. So dinosaurs were eating birds. And this article says the recent discoveries of the contents of dinosaur stomachs pose a gut-wrenching challenge to the idea that dinosaurs gave rise to birds, because it now turns out that dinosaurs ate them. So feathered dinosaurs, and they say that those are unrelated to the lineage that leads to modern day birds. That's how they explain that away. But dinosaurs were eating birds. Dinosaurs were eating mammals. This dinosaur has the remains of 3 mammalian jaws in its gut. And we see that mammals were eating dinosaurs. All this is in the fossil record, published literature. So what you're looking at here is this beaver-like creature eating the juvenile, small dinosaur here in its stomach. So I'm from Singapore. A number of years ago, I went back to Singapore and I went to the Singapore Zoo. And they had a dinosaur exhibition. Now, don't ask me why they had a dinosaur exhibition. I didn't see any dinosaurs there. But they had a sign. And the sign said dinosaurs didn't walk alone. They live alongside birds and mammals like this creature that you see here. And this raccoon-looking mammal measured about 1 meter in length and hunted smaller dinosaurs, such as the Psittacosaurus. Well, just a few years ago, they found another example of this mammal hunting dinosaurs. Except now it's not hunting the young ones. It's actually hunting the full-grown dinosaur, 3 times its size. Same to mammal and dinosaur. And this is what it looks like, the fossil. And these 2 fossils were actually buried in their fighting pose. You can see here, look at the arm. The arm of the mammal is holding the jaw of the dinosaur. The back leg is intertwined, it's fighting together, wrestling. And the jaw is in the side. The mammal is actually attacking this dinosaur. Something happens so quickly that they're forever buried in that fighting pose. This is an artist's impression of what happened before they were buried in flood sediments. We also see, mammals were eating dinosaurs, and we see that birds were eating mammals. All this going back to around the same timeline, using the evolutionary dates. So birds, mammals, dinosaurs, they were all there together. They were all eating one another at the time of the flood. Yeah, when was the last time you've been to a museum and you see dinosaurs, birds, and mammals all in the same display? Why don't they do that? That doesn't fit with a so-called idea of an age of dinosaurs, right? But they were all there. We know that even the scientific literature, the evolutionists themselves published. So earlier on, I mentioned that most of the dinosaur fossils are the result of a big flood. Well, as you remember for this morning, but I'll just repeat quickly for those who are not here, how does the fossil form? They say a dinosaur dies, sinks to the bottom of the ocean, it gets buried, that's all the rock layers you see here, and then the bones are exposed, you get a fossil. Here's another one, right? From a book here. Is that how you get a fossil? Remember what we saw this morning, this pig? In 7 days got reduced to that. You don't fall in a nice position. Yet not only do we have that mammal attacking the dinosaur and fighting pose, we have dinosaurs fighting dinosaurs in their fighting pose and buried, like this too. So what you're looking at here, the Protoceratops on the left, look at the mouth, it's biting the arm of the Velociraptor on the right. The Velociraptor on the right has a claw on the neck of the dinosaur on the left, and they got forever buried in this fighting pose. This is actually buried in flood sediments in what is today Inner Mongolia, the Gobi Desert. An artist's impression of what happened. Catastrophe. What would you expect to see if there was a worldwide flood? Fossils of dead things all over the earth. Flood sediments. That's exactly what we see with dinosaur bones. If you're a dinosaur geek like me, you know that if you want to find dinosaur bones, the best place to go is what we call dinosaur bone beds. Dinosaur bone beds, what's that? These are places around the world where we have tens of thousands of dinosaur bones, and they're all jumbled up in one huge pile together, mixed with marine fossils like clams and fish. In Canada alone, there are more than 24 of such bone beds. Some of these formations, they're massive. Sometimes the bones seem to be aligned in one direction, as if they're being laid down by flowing water. They go 1 square mile in one direction, and then they change another square mile in another direction. How do you get something like that? Tens of thousands of dinosaur bones. Surely all the dinosaurs did not say, hey, let's all die together in one corner. And why would they be mixed with marine fossils like clams and fish? They don't live in the same area. Can you think of something that will explain why we get that? Noah's flood? Water sorting action, bringing carcasses from huge areas in one huge pile, then mixing them, burying them together with marine fossils and clams. That's why we see dinosaur bone beds all around the world. Evidence of a worldwide flood. I'm going to show you some other pictures of dinosaurs now. Okay, I want you to see if you can, without me telling you first, if you can see what all these pictures share in common. All right? Notice anything yet? What about this? What do you notice? All their heads are bent backwards. Heads and tails bent backwards in the opposite direction. This is known as the dinosaur death pose, or opistotonic death pose, if you want to be technical. Dinosaurs, when their bones are intact and they have a long neck, very often, the necks and tails are bent backwards in the opposite direction. No creature sleeps like this. So why do we get that? This was a mystery for many years until a researcher, Alicia Cutler, she did an experiment. You see, chickens have a long neck. And chickens have a ligament that runs ligament that runs down the back of the neck that allows them to pull the head back. Of course, when the creature's alive, it doesn't bend that way. But she took freshly killed chickens and she threw them in cold water. So now, when you place them in water, they're buoyant, they're light. It overcomes the weight of the body. And within seconds, that ligament contracts and all their heads took on the exact same pose. She did the same thing on big birds like emus, and the exact same thing happened. But the moment she cut the ligament, the heads no longer bend back. So we know what actually caused that. And in the paper, she said that although the roads to the opistotonic death pose are many, immersion in water is the simplest explanation. Friends, dinosaur bone beds, the evidence that at the time of death, this creature were in water. The dinosaur death pose, necks and tails bent backwards in opposite direction because at the time of death, they were in. You see where I'm going with that? What about armored dinosaurs? Do they have a long neck? No, right? They kind of armored and they kind of walk around like that, right? So how do we find their bones? Well, in 2017, National Geographic actually described one of the best preserved armored dinosaurs of its kind, the Nodosaur. This one is so well preserved that the whole three-dimensional armor is actually preserved. You can tell the shape, what it looks like what you see here. This is so well preserved, it was described as partially mineralized, not completely turned to stone. We can see the remnants of his last meal in the stomach, patches of skin, reddish pigment, dinosaur armor. And the National Geographic article in June 2017 said that this huge creature, which they say was about 3,000 pounds, was believed to be washed away by a flood river, buried something like 80 or 100 meters in the open sea. But this is what caught my attention. This dinosaur was buried upside down, a rapid undersea barrier. And I got very excited. Do you know why? Because just 1 month before that, I read another scientific journal in May. This is June, just 1 month before in May. And in May, they again found another armored dinosaur. Again, three-dimensional preservation, very well preserved. But this is Ankylosaurus, the one that has a club at the end of the tail. Again, abundant soft tissue preservation across the skeleton, including bony skin armor, skin impression, and keratin. It's protein in there. And this is why I got excited, because this dinosaur again was found in what position? Upside down, that's right. So one upside down in May, one upside down in June. I knew something was going on here. I wasn't the only one, because by September, another group of secular scientists had the same idea. So they look at all these armored dinosaurs that they find in Canada. It turns out that 70% of all armored dinosaurs are actually found upside down. So what's going on? They begin to do computer modeling, look at the balance, and they realize that because of the armor, these creatures are very unstable. You place them in water, yes, they will float upright. But all you need is for a small wave to come along, and they will all go belly up. And they say in the paper, we use computer modeling to show that Ankylosaurus slightly flip over while suspended in. Friends, when you start with the Bible and the worldwide flood, everything makes sense. We don't have to be afraid of dinosaurs. We don't have to be afraid of science. They testify to the Word of God. The Bible says that God made the wild animals on which day? The sixth day. He made man on which day? The sixth day. That means that dinosaurs and man live together, according to the Bible. So if the fall did not happen, something like that could have been very possible. But is the word dinosaur in the Bible at all? No? Why? I'm going to name a list of words, okay? See if you can tell me what they all share in common. Incandescent light bulb. What else can we think about? Incandescent light bulb, bicycle, sewing machine. But what do all these share in common? Not in the Bible, yeah, but many of these words are actually older than the word dinosaur. The word dinosaur is actually a very new word, coined 1841 by Sir Richard Owen. So that's not a surprise why we don't see the word dinosaur in the Bible, because the early translations of the Bible of Greek and Hebrew into English were hundreds of years before that. Same reason we don't find the word computer or laptops in the Bible, right? Those words were not yet coined. But in Job chapter 40, God is confronting Job with an animal that was created, was alive in his day. He says, look at Behemoth, which I made along with you. A creature alive in his day, which feeds on grass like an ox, eats grass. What strength is in his loin, what power in the muscle of his belly. His tail moves like a cedar. His sinews and thighs are close knit. His bones are like tubes of bronze. His limbs like rods of iron. He ranked first among the works of God. The largest land creature that God created eats grass like an ox, has a tail like a cedar. What's a cedar? Tree. The cedar trees of Lebanon were so big that they were used to build the pillars in King Solomon's palace. What can that be? Some Bible commentators, they put a footnote, Behemoth, maybe it's an elephant, maybe it's a hippo. Well, give it a try. Tail the size of a cedar tree. Does it match? What about that? There's only one animal that fits this, a long-necked cephalopods dinosaur. If you don't believe me, next time you go to a zoo, secretly take some pictures. Is that a cedar tree? What about that? A tiny flap there, right? Some Bible commentators say, oh, maybe it's a water buffalo or an ox. Really? Does the ox have a tail like a cedar tree? And if behemoth is an ox, you remember what the passage says? Behold, behemoth, he eats grass like an ox. So if behemoth is an ox, then you're saying, behold, the ox, he eats grass like an ox. Doesn't make sense at all. There's only one creature that fits this description. It's a long-necked, several-paw dinosaur. But you say, wait a minute, Job saw dinosaurs? When did Job live? Before the flood or after the flood? After the flood, how do we know? There are a few passages that talk about how God had already judged the wicked with a flood. 4 friends of Job, they come from post-Abrahamic cities in the Edomite area. So this is after the flood, which means that dinosaurs had to survive the flood, which means the dinosaur had to be on the ark, which means they lived alongside man, and they only died off in more recent years. Do you see how starting with the Word of God brings you a very different understanding of dinosaurs? But if dinosaurs lived with men, do we have any evidence that people were familiar with these creatures? Well, we know that legends of dragons exist in countries all around the world. Well, before they coined the word dinosaur in 1841, paleontologists were already familiar with the marine reptiles, the ichthyosaur and plesiosaur. So if you go out there, you saw the 2 bones out there. One is the plesiosaur, the bigger one, and the smaller one at the back of it is the ichthyosaur. They knew about that in the 1800s. What do you think they used to call these creatures in the paleontology books? Ichthyosaur and plesiosaur, this is from the book. It used to be called the Book of Great Sea Dragons. Very interesting. Leviathan, Genesis 41, Job 41, Leviathan. Leviathan is in Hebrew. When it got translated to the Greek Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, do you know what the Greek text says? Dragon. Could these creatures, legends of dragons around the world, could they just have been dinosaurs? Well, let's go to 3rd century BC in China. We have this water basin, and I talk about this in my book Titans as well. I'm the co-author of the book. This, what you're looking at here, is a bronze basin from the 3rd century BC in China. What's on the handle there? Let's zoom into it. Does it look like a Camarasaurus, a long-necked dinosaur with a very boxy head? Could that be what it is trying to depict? You know, I have this book on my shelf in the office. This book is not about dinosaurs, it's about ancient bronze artifacts. You go to one of them, and that's the one they depict there. And what's interesting is that this, what they call a dragon, see, the Chinese word for dragon is long. Long means dragon. Dinosaur is Kong Long. Literally translated as terrifying dragon. So you're long and Kong Long, okay? They call that a long, a dragon. When this book was brought to the West, translated to English, the English translator did not retain the word dragon. He changed the word. Do you know what he called that? He called this a long-necked feline. A cat. A long-necked cat. Have you ever seen a long-necked cat? So why do you think the translator changed the translation from dragon into a long-necked cat? Well, I think that if we retain it as dragon, it becomes very clear to everybody what it's meant to depict. But maybe it's just China. Let's leave China. Let's go to Cambodia. And in Cambodia, we have the world's biggest temple complex, the Angkor Wat Temple Complex. It's a World Heritage Site. We know it's real. And when you go to this temple, the Thap Prom Temple that was built in the 12th century, you can see all kinds of animal engravings on the pillar. What's in the center there? What's that? Let's zoom into that. You see that? So if you go to the table out there, you can actually see a cast. They went there to take imprint and make a cast of it. You check it out for yourself. What's that? Yeah, everywhere I go, people tell me that's a dinosaur. How did they know how to draw something like that? This is all the way in the 12th century. Dinosaurs were not discovered until the 19th century, 1841. So why is it that people were engraving things like that? Hieroglyphic? No, we have other animals there. Water buffaloes, monkeys, swans, they're all real animals. What's on the back? When paleontologists first found Stegosaurus, they used to think that, do you know what Stegosaurus means? Roof lizard. Why roof lizard? Because they used to think that these plates were all flat, like an armored piece, like a turtle shell. So even back then, for the first few decades, they were reconstructing these things wrongly. But all the way back in Cambodia, people were engraving things like this. So let's leave Asia, let's go to the UK. Famous painting in Europe, Mona Lisa. Who painted that? Leonardo da Vinci. Well, 10 to 15 years after he painted this, he actually had a well-known drawing. And this is part of the UK Royal Collection Trust. It's called Cats, Lions, and a Dragon. So if you go to a website, you type in Leonardo's dragon, you see this article here. All right? So that's his drawing. So he's trying to show how flexible all these creatures are. Cats, lions, and in the middle you have a dragon. Let's zoom into the dragon. It actually resembles some of the reconstructions that we have of certain kinds of dinosaurs. How did they know that? Here's another one, Northern England. There's a cathedral, Carlisle Cathedral in England. And in the 1400s, there was a bishop, a minister of the church. And when they died, they buried him under the floor of the choir. So that's his tombstone. You go to the church, lift up the carpet, you see his tombstone. On that metal strip, we have animal engravings. Eels, dogs, fish, birds. And what's that in the center? Two dragons necking together. That's dinosaur behavior there. Look at that. And what's interesting is they're long-necked dinosaurs, but the one on the left is different from the one on the right. The one on the left has a tail with 4 backward-pointing spikes. And that's very interesting because there's only one long-necked dinosaur with a tail with 4 backward-pointing spikes. It's a Tyrannosaurus. You can identify the engraving just from the drawing itself. In case you're thinking that these people in the past were digging out bones and trying to reconstruct them, back then, you get even the 1800s, paleontology, the reconstruction wasn't any good at all. And what's interesting is Tyrannosaurus. The bones are never found in the UK. They're found in China. Stegosaurus bones are never found in Cambodia. So why is that? Remember, the bones represent where these creatures lived before the flood. These engravings represent where these creatures lived after the flood. These are post-flood civilizations. You wouldn't expect them to be in the same place. Like this article says, if the evolutionary story of dinosaurs is true, these creatures should have died out millions of years before human beings walked the earth. How could the images be engraved on a 500-year-old tomb in northern England? Like this cartoon says, if people weren't around when dinosaurs were there, then who drew their pictures? But don't the fossils prove that they're millions of years old? Well, let me tell you a story about a well-known evolutionist, Dr. Mary Schweitzer. Keep in mind she's an evolutionist. 2005, she found a T-Rex bone, very big. So she had to break it up, bring it to a lab. And what she found appeared to be blood vessels, and what seemed to be the remains of what used to be red blood cells. She found that in W dinosaurs, T-Rex, Triceratops, time and time again. She dissolved away the mineral, and what was left behind, she said, was flexible and resilient. When stretched, returned to its original shape. What you're looking at here, that's T-Rex soft tissue. Again, when I say soft tissue, I'm not talking about soft body parts that turn to stone. I'm talking about original biomaterial that's there. And bottom right, what seems to be the remains of red blood cells there. I mean, look at that. You know, I like to joke when I'm hungry, I say, I look at that, that reminds me of beef jerky. Mary Schweitzer says this, it was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. But of course, I couldn't believe it. I said to the lab technician, the bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? Well, Dr. Schweitzer, could it just be that maybe the bones are not 65 million years old? As they begin to look at it more, they even begin to find osteocytes, that's bone cells. Look at that, bone cells in dinosaur bone. And what's in the center here? Why is it colored? This is a highly specific test that look at dinosaur DNA. That's double helical DNA that's still in there of a certain length. Skeptics say, oh, that's contamination. No, it's not contamination. Because look, where is this thing It's only in the nucleus. It's nowhere else. So it's not contamination. She said, I just got goosebumps because everybody knows these things don't last for 65 million years old. She said, as the fossils dissolved, transparent vessels were left behind. It was totally shocking. I didn't believe it until we've done it 17 times. 17 times? Who does an experiment 17 times? That's a complete waste of money. You know, enzymes and all these chemicals, they're expensive. When I used to work in a lab, you know, if I have to do an experiment more than once, you know, my supervisor starts complaining, says, it's expensive, all these things, you're wasting money, you know. 17 times. Why? Because she knew that this doesn't fit with the idea of millions of years. She said after we had the data, I didn't publish for over a year. I was terrified. In another interview, she described how her funding was cut. And she had only enough funds to continue her research because an anonymous private donor gave her enough funds to continue her research for another 1.5 years. Of course, later on, she was able to secure more funding. But why were her fellow evolutionists so upset with her? Because they knew it can't be soft tissue. They tried to prove it's not soft tissue. Over the years, they come up with about half a dozen explanations for how, after that, when they realized it's real, they try to come up with half a dozen explanations for how they can explain how these biomolecules can be millions of years old. But guess what? Every single one of those explanations has been refuted by their own fellow evolutionists in the secular literature. They don't have a good explanation. So here we have a video of Mary Schweitzer. And keep in mind, this is a bit grainy because this is a video from the 1990s. All right, so keep that in mind. But listen to what she has to say.
Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was. And it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
No. She showed us video she took under the microscope.
That's really what happened?
Yes.
That's the dinosaur bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old.
So you see this and you think, what? You
I didn't want to tell anybody.
that you'd be ridiculed,
Yes.
right?
And so I said to my technician, okay, do it again. I don't believe it.
And yet, in sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels. She finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
She said she dissolved the bone away and there were blood vessels. And, you know, I was like shocked. I mean,
How could that be?
How could that be? That's right.
The things Mary was finding inside dinosaur bones,
Look at that.
blood vessels, and even what seemed to be intact cells, pose a radical challenge to the existing rules of science, that organic material can't possibly survive even 1 million years, let alone 68 million.
Did you hear the irony in the last sentence? Science tells us these things cannot last that long, but do they ever doubt the millions of years? No. As scientists begin to look at it more, they begin to isolate other things like collagen, which is a protein, very common protein, structural protein. But they also isolate very delicate proteins like elastin and laminin in a bone that they claim is 80 million years old. Later on, another paper, they discovered collagen in a bone that they claim is 195 million years old. The issue with that is that it's easy to go into a lab and do experiments to test how long these things take to break down. Yes, you can put it in freezing liquid nitrogen, slow down the decay, slow down the breakdown, but the laws of thermodynamics still go on. You can only slow it down by so much. The chemical bonds will still break down over time. And we know that the maximum possible theoretical limit is 300,000 to 900,000 years max. This is not creationist numbers. These are numbers published in the secular literature by evolutionists. 300,000 to 900,000 years max, collagen will be gone. Yet it's there in multiple samples of dinosaur bones. Dinosaurs, they live in freezing liquid nitrogen. They live in climates like ours. The paper says that 15,000 years, you'll be all gone. Just last year, there was new research done at the Creation Research Society conference, annual conference. 4 scientists looked at this more closely. They find that actually the decay rate is much faster. They live in climates like ours. In 10,000 years, Collagen will degrade to just 1%. Less than that, you shouldn't be able to detect it at all. Yet it's there. 10,000 years is upper limit. We find this in many dinosaur bones. Mary Schweitzer says this: when you think about it, the laws of chemistry and biology and everything else that we know say it should be gone. It should be degraded completely. Do you see what she's saying? She says science tells us these things shouldn't be that old. You know, skeptics often say, you Christians, you cannot explain the science. You say God must have done it. You have a God of the gaps. Ever heard of that? It's actually the other way around. It's what we know from science, what we can calculate in the lab, that tells you that these things cannot be millions of years old. If you still want to believe they're millions of years old, I have news for you. You're being unscientific there. It becomes a faith position, a blind faith position for you. So what's the latest explanation? Although many analytical techniques have shown that organic material can be preserved in fossils for millions of years. So this is in the paper, right? So how do we know that it can be preserved for millions of years? Because it's there in a dinosaur bone. Circular reasoning. But the second half of this sentence actually gives us the explanation. The geochemical factors that allow this preservation are not well understood. They don't know. Now online, if you go on atheistic website, one of the common objections is something called the iron preservation model. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. And you say iron preservation, when you put the bones in an iron-rich solution, it can last for millions of years. Really? How did they come to that conclusion? Mary Schweitzer, she put some blood vessels in an iron-rich solution. Essentially, she pickled it. She put it on the desktop for 2 years. After 2 years, she could still see the blood vessels. That's the explanation for how it can last for 68 million years. Yeah, it comes down to that. Well, recently, there was a new publication just last year. They take chicken bones, put them in calcium carbonate solution, put them in phosphate solution, put them in iron-rich solution, what she claimed was supposed to preserve them, and put them in water. And guess what? The one in the iron-rich solution broke down the fastest. Putting it in plain water preserved it even better. That's what we Christians have been saying for years. Now the science is caught up with what I've always been saying. They don't have an explanation. Bones do not have to be turned into stone to be fossils. And usually, most of the original bone is still present in a dinosaur fossil. Philip Currie, famous evolutionary dinosaur expert. Here's another biochemist. Even if the T-Rex had died in a colder, drier climate that Hell's Creek, environmental radiation would have degraded its body. Bones absorb uranium and thorium like crazy. You got an internal dose that will wipe out biomolecules. What he's saying here is that even if you can account for all the biochemistry, background radiation itself will destroy all biomolecules in 1 million years. 1 million years. I maintain a database online with Dr. Brian Thomas from the Institute for Creation Research. Brian Thomas actually got his PhD looking at ancient collagen. You can get a PhD in this area, it's well-established science. Okay, and in this database, we catalog secular journals, top journals, Nature, PLOS ONE, all these top journals. And we catalog these papers that talk about original dinosaur soft tissue. They shouldn't be there. To date, we have 61 examples of such dinosaur soft tissue. And if we don't just look at dinosaur soft tissue, what if we look at papers that talk about ancient bacterial fossilized layers, or extinct turtles, or extinct birds? It goes up to 127 cases of ancient biomaterial. Look at that. Every few months, we have to update this database because they keep finding things that shouldn't be there. Now, again, I don't believe in the billions of years. But if we were to use the evolutionary billions of years, what do you think is the oldest sample using the dates where we still have original biomolecules? Anybody want to guess? 10 million? 100 million? 1 billion? 2.5 billion years. They still find original biomolecules. This is their dates. Evolutionists believe they dig down, you're going further back in time, dig down to the very first life, you still find original biomaterial there. Friends, if you believe that that's really 2.5 billion years, that's not science. Dinosaur soft tissue Which history does it fit best with? Billions of years or recent creation? You see, friends, if the world is 6,000 years old, most of the fossils are the result of a worldwide flood about 4,300 years ago. This is exactly what we would expect to see. Mary Schweitzer says this. So that leaves us with two alternatives for interpretation. Either the bones aren't as old as we think they are, or maybe we don't know exactly how these things get preserved. We already show you from science that these things cannot be even 1,000,000 years old. So what's the other alternative? The bones aren't as old as we think they are. They're young. So earlier in the first session, I talked about potassium argon radiometric dating, right? And showed that every single time it tests, it gives you millions and millions of years old, but it never gets it right, not even once. Now let's talk about a different one, carbon dating. Carbon dating is interesting. People think carbon dating gives you millions of years old. It doesn't. Carbon dating is used to date things that are young. Why? Because the half-life of carbon-14 is 5,730 years. Essentially what that means, every 5,730 years, the carbon-14, which is radioactive, halves itself. The half-life is so short that if any bone is 100,000 years old, any fossil is 100,000 years old, there will be no carbon-14 in there. It will be carbon date, essentially. But when we test dinosaur bones, guess what they have? They contain carbon-14. They are young. This publication, Brian Thomas, that's the one I was working with, PhD, he's dated many dinosaur bones. They all contain carbon-14. They are young. You look at coal, look at oil, they contain carbon-14. Look at diamonds, they contain carbon-14. Diamonds, the bonds are so tight because it's so hard that there cannot be any contamination in there. And the radiocarbon levels in there, they're significantly way above what could be expected from background radiation. You can't appeal to contamination. And even carbon-14 in dinosaur bones, online skeptics, atheists, oh, contamination. No, it's not. Because modern radiocarbon labs, in the calculation itself, they already account for modern contamination. So if the method accounts for modern contamination, we cannot turn around and still say it doesn't match because of modern contamination. If that is the case, if it's still modern contamination, then the whole method needs to be thrown out the window again. So carbon-14, radiocarbon, is the friend of the creationists because dinosaur bones contain carbon-14. Earlier on, I mentioned the nucleus, we find DNA. Secular papers, we have actually 3 papers that actually talk about dinosaur DNA. DNA is very unstable. Even using the evolutionary numbers, if you freeze it down, 6.8 million years, all the DNA should be gone. That's the upper limit. 6.8 million years, that's not even 1/10 of when they say dinosaurs died out. Dinosaurs didn't live in freezing liquid nitrogen. The paper tells us that if they live in climates like ours, 22,000 years and all the DNA will be gone. At Creation Ministries, we say DNA stands for dinos not ancient. So the discovery of original protein, DNA, and radiocarbon in dinosaur bones is a huge problem for evolution and the idea for millions of years. So we have covered a lot about dinosaurs. Let's sum it up, shall we? B, C, D, and E. Actually, A, B, C, D, E. A is actually anatomy. I say that a dinosaur is a land creature that walks in an upright position because it's a unique hip anatomy. B stands for Bible. Job chapter 40, right? Largest land creature that God created. Its glass like an ox, has a tail like a cedar. Then we saw that they survived the flood and only went extinct in more recent years. Centuries of dinosaur artifacts. All the artifacts that we showed you earlier on. Looking at dinosaur bones, we see evidence of a worldwide flood. That's D. So what do we see? Just to recall, dinosaur bone beds, fighting dinosaurs. The necks bend backwards, armored dinosaurs upside down. Then E stands for evidence of a young Earth. Original biomaterial in dinosaur bones, soft tissue, DNA, and radiocarbon. Friends, the Earth is young, and dinosaurs can be trusted. The Bible can be trusted. Do you see why we say that dinosaurs are missionary lizards? This creature that's been used to promote the idea of evolution, train yourself and you can use this as a way to reach out to your friends and your families. Sometimes most people never get to hear this, but another group of people, after hearing this, they harden their hearts and they still choose not to believe. And here's one example. Here you have an atheistic philosopher. And he said this: I want atheism to be true, and I'm made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope that I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that. You can choose to be like this guy, cover your eyes and pretend not to see anything. That doesn't change a thing. Because if God's our creator, we are his creation. One day we're going to stand before God. We're going to give an account for our lives. There are consequences to ideas. And you can choose to be like him. But that's the worst possible thing you can do, because if you stand before God, what are you going to say? And if you are like this guy, I highly encourage you to reconsider your position. In fact, the thing you should do is to repent, turn to the Lord, believe in him. So again, dinosaurs. Almost every issue of Creation magazine, we have a dinosaur article in there. I think the latest one I have one as well, which I wrote with Dr. Jonathan Safety. Creation Answers book, one whole chapter on dinosaurs, chapter 19 in there. I covered this today, it comes as a pack as well. Exploring Dinosaurs for upper elementary and above. And the next one is my favorite book, and I'm biased here because I'm a co-author of this book. But Titans of the Sea, Earth, Sea, and Air. This is perhaps our most in-depth book. It's written at a high school level, but it's written to be easy to understand. So if you have younger kids that love dinosaurs, this might be something to look at. But it's not a kid's book. This is for adults. Feathered Dinosaurs, there's 2 chapters in there. What did dinosaurs eat? 1 chapter in there. Young kids, they love this, the part about diet, because I even tell them what's the biggest dinosaur poop that has been found. 20 pounds from a T-Rex. So they love things like that. But all the artifacts I mentioned are in that one book alone. So again, lots of interesting resources, but don't forget free resources that's available to everyone on our website. It's creation.com. I would like to end my talks with a Bible verse. I love the book of Job. And Job is very interesting. Because you read Job, God tested Job, and after that his friends came along, right? And after that, Job responded to them. And he rebuked his friends. How did he rebuke his friends? In Job chapter 12 and 13, he actually rebuked them. He said, look at the birds, look at the fish, look at the beasts. Consider them, then consider creation. But then what happened after that? Job began to get very depressed. He started to complain to God, right? He started to complain to God. He began to question God. And God doesn't say anything for 37 chapters. And then in the 38th chapter, God spoke. And he spoke for 4 chapters. And God gave Job the same counsel back to himself. Look at my creation. How did I make that? Look at the ostrich. Look at the eagle. Look at the birds. Come to Job chapter 40, largest land creature. Look at behemoth. Look at Leviathan. Just talking about his creation. And what did Job do? Job turned around and said this. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. When God confronted Job with his creation, Job repented, he turned around, and he glorified God. Friends, the next time you think of dinosaurs, don't think of strange-looking plants and volcanoes in the background. When you think about dinosaurs, think about God's creation. Then turn around and give God the glory. Thank you.
Joel, thank you for being here. I know we'll be around for just a little bit longer for any questions.
You want to do a Q&A? Yes.
If you have any questions now, I'll let you do it at this time. So,
Yeah. I had lots of questions earlier on. Yes, at the back.
Okay, I'm not disputing the word. I believe I love Jesus. And regardless of the time period of this, you know, in the study that I do, that it had to be environmental and physiological factors that they had to be perfect for the preservation of these tissues. Now, you know, I'm thinking maybe that could have been another miracle of the Lord.
Another miracle of?
A miracle
To preserve the bones.
to preserve that stuff and keep it in the perfect environment.
No, I don't actually think so. We show from a calculation that if the Earth is just 6,000 years old, 4,300 years, we will expect to see these things. You don't need any special conditions. If it's millions of years old, then that's where you get a problem. A lot of these bones, dinosaur bones, are actually found in frozen places like in Alaska. You have dinosaur bones up there. They didn't live there, right? And they are buried with subtropical plants in Alaska. It tells you that those places were not that warm in the past. But today it's cold, and those cold conditions could have preserved those bones pretty well as well. So if they just keep in mind 4,300 years ago, the flood, this is exactly what we expect to see. It's nothing surprising for us. I hope that answers that. Yes, in fact. How many species of dinosaurs? That's excellent. Excellent question, because there are actually thousands of species and names of dinosaurs. But what is a species? Can you define a species? There are many definitions of species. Some people say species must be able to interbreed. Well, the Bible doesn't use the word species. The Bible uses something called the created kind. In Genesis, it says God create creatures reproduce after their own kind. Repeats 10 times in Genesis 1. Create after their own kind. So what does that mean? That means they must be able to reproduce and hybridize. So within each created kind, you can have many individual species. So you have the cat kind. For example, the 39 species of cat come from a cat kind in the past. Let's just do something fun. I think you guys will enjoy this. Because just a little quiz for you. That's in my biblical biology talk. Okay. See if you guys can guess these creatures, all right? I know I'm tracking a bit here, but I think you guys will enjoy having some fun. Okay. Can anybody tell me what is this animal here? This is actually a llama. Llama is a cross between a camel and a llama. So, different species, but they are from the llama or llama created kind. Okay, here's another one. That's why it's fun, that's why you should do this. Okay, this next one here. So that's the llama you saw here, C-A-M-A, llama. What's a wholphin? Anybody just shout out your answer. Wholphin? Real dolphin. So that's a real dolphin kind, created kind. Pig and ball, I don't know what you call it, pig ball kind. Buffalo, what's that? Buffalo and a cow, that's right. Tiger? Sorry, liger? Lion and tiger. Grizzly bear. Polar bear and grizzly bear. Zonkey. Zebra donkey. Zos. Zebra horse. So these are the horse kind you're looking at here. And a jeep or jeep, I don't know how you say that. What's that? Goat and sheep. So these are the different created kinds, right? So we have species within each created kind. And the created kind in case-by-case basis, but in most cases will be near to what we would call the family level. And we see after the flood that many of these species, within a few hundred years, they have already speciated according to the created kind. So keep that in mind, what is a kind, okay? How many created kinds are there on board the ark? Thousands of dinosaur names. Turns out there are only about 55 to 60 kinds of dinosaur. So 2 of each kind on board the ark, you're looking at about 100 to 120 dinosaurs on board the ark, and that's all. Some dinosaurs are big, some are small. The average size of a dinosaur is about the size of a large cow. So 120 large cows. And that's assuming they're full grown. If they're younger, they will be smaller, because reptiles, they grow for most of their life. Yeah, they grow the S-shaped curve, but they grow throughout their life. So if they're younger, they'll be smaller. Think about this. If Noah is going to bring 2 of every animal on board the ark to reproduce after the flood, will he bring grandma and grandpa, or will he bring 2 teenagers? 2 young ones, right, to reproduce? They will be much smaller. Average size, the size of a cow. What's the small one? I don't know. Average size of a sheep. But the idea is there's lots of enough space there. So how many dinosaur kinds? About 55 to 60 dinosaur kinds. And I hope that helps. Yep. Anyone else? Feathered dinosaur? I had some people. Anybody want? Or you have a different question? Anybody? Okay, I'll just cover. Since no one else, I'll do the feathered dinosaur side. Okay, so I had a few questions about feathered dinosaur earlier today. I have a whole talk on feathered dinosaur that I do for universities. I'll just take a few parts out. So if you read the literature, they often believe, the evolutionists believe that dinosaurs evolved into modern day birds, or they just say dinosaurs are birds. And one reason why is they will say that they're feathered dinosaurs. So let's address that issue here. Oops, where is that? Okay. So in the fossil record, we do have two very distinct types. We do have some birds with strange features, but have real flight feathers. These are birds, they're flying, they have wings, real feathers, and they're extinct. At the same time, we have another group that are dinosaurs, not birds. But these dinosaurs on the body, they have a fuzzy structure that looks like hair. And evolutionists call that proto-feathers. That means on the way they're becoming feathers. And so they take the real birds in those layers, and they take the fuzzy dinosaur bones, and they conflate both as feathered dinosaur. Well, so what are these actually? This is one example of a bird in the fossil record. Actually, this one, the Eoconfuciusornis, some of the features are very similar to modern birds. Look at that. All right? Eoconfuciusornis, sexual dimorphism, male and female in the fossil record. We have more than 1,000 of such fossils. Bird in every way. He has wings, there's flight feathers, bird head, bird brain, even a fused bird tail. The wing is very similar to a chicken wing, actually. So the top two, these are the Eoconfuciusornis, the extinct birds. The wing here, the fusion here, same, very similar to what you see in the chicken. Some of these birds are Microraptor, they are birds, flight feathers, even feathers on its feet, internal tie. All right? And we actually have birds today that are actually far more feathered than some of these so-called feathered dinosaurs. Now let me go on to show you more pictures. Now I'm going to show you what the dinosaur fuzz looked like. It really looks like hair. Look at that. That is not feathers. It's like fur. Right? See on the back. So what is this? Evolutionists say this. The feathery structure, they say it's feathers, proto-feathers. Why? The feathery structure seems to most closely resemble modern birds, and they may have been hollow. Sounds convincing, right? But in the small footnote at the bottom, the structures are piled so thick, it has not been possible to isolate a single one for examination. They haven't actually looked under a microscope. Well, scientists have done experiments to look at this fuzzy structure, and they say that it's not feathers at all. It's just decayed skin collagen. Collagen is the most common protein in your skin. It's a structural protein. And when it breaks down, collagen takes on this fibrous looking pattern. They look exactly the same like what we see in these fossils. So we see some of these dinosaurs. Reptiles, you have this crest at the back of the neck. And when it compress, when it decays, they can actually take on those same fibrous structure. So a very well-known evolutionist is Dr. Alan Fiducia, who I have been in contact with for the last 8 to 9 years. Every month we email one another. He's an evolutionist. But we just talk about anatomy and dinosaurs and science. And he doesn't believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. He believes that the dinosaurs, because he's an evolutionist, came from an earlier unrelated line of reptiles. But in his earlier years, Dr. Fiducia and another scientist, Dr. Solly, they did some experiments. So they said, this doesn't look anything like feathers. So what they did was they take sharks and dolphins, and these things don't fly. Take the carcasses, bury them under the ground for 1 year. And after 1 year, he dig out the carcass, and guess what? The same exact fuzzy structures were seen on their fossils. You look at the fossils of marine reptiles that swim in the ocean, and you see the same exact fuzzy structures. These are not feathers. These are decayed skin. And they say that the fibers show a striking similarity to the structure and levels of organization of dermal collagen. The proposal that these fibers are proto-feathers is dismissed. Here's another one. This one is not even the line that leads to the modern day birds, but you see the fossil? See what's this on the tail here? Right? And so Alan Fiducia thinks that this creature most likely had like a like a frill or spatula, because this is semi-aquatic, they happen to swim in the ocean. And as the structural protein degrades, could have left that behind. But many reptiles today have something like that, like what you see over here. Could that be what it is? So if that's the case, then this would be decayed skin collagen. Another proposal is something I proposed. It might be something like the iguana. In this case, it's not collagen, it's rather keratin. Keratin would be like your nails, right? Beta keratin. And you can see in this short video here, which is interesting, that even these spikes on the iguana, they even shed the skin. You can even peel them out one by one like that. So this might be similar to what we saw in some of those dinosaurs that you see earlier on. That's not feathers at all. There's no evidence that it's hollow. So the evolutionists say it's hollow because if you look at this one here, I'm not sure you can see from where you are. Notice here, you see there's a dark stripe in the center, right? See a dark stripe? The dark stripe here, that dark stripe is nothingness, it's hollow. So it's a reflection of the light. Until Alan Ferdisher points out that on this side here, you have a dark stripe with no surrounding material. So the dark stripe cannot be hollow. It has to be something. It's not hollow. And hollow doesn't mean it's a feather. Because you can have hair and it can be hollow. The polar bear also has hollow hair, look at that. Right? So rather, when you look at the decaying carcass of collagen, we see the exact same structures forming. So you can look at collagen fibers from different reptiles, birds, chickens, and the collagen takes on the same fibers looking form, many forms. Like the top here, you can see collagen around the scales. They can form this kind of structure. And in this case, you have one layer going this direction, another layer crisscross the other direction here. Many forms. In the top right-hand corner here, it looks like one central vein, and then you have all these little branches, like a tree coming up from it. Or it can be like a piece of cloth, like a frayed piece of cloth, like that. Very often even coming up from one single tuft. So here's another one, great white shark. They don't fly, all this. You cut it cross-section and it gets on this round-looking structure. For marine reptiles, coming out as a tuft. So collagen, as skin collagen, as it breaks down from a lot of these heavy structures that we see out there. And they actually resemble exactly what we see in the dinosaur so-called proto-feathers. So here's another one. Take a look at it. This one from flying reptiles. Looks like hair, right? Until you realize that this is actually the same thing. So what here is from the flying reptiles that try to make it feathered today. What you look at here is calcified tendons from owls that are living today. Birds are living today. It's the same structure there. Various types of fiber morphology identified as pterosaur protofeathers have striking similarity to collagen fibers and calcified tendons that mimic not only the pterosaur, the flying reptiles structure, but many stages of the so-called feathered evolutionary model. So what you're looking at here is the collagen fibers. Most of these are marine reptiles swim in the ocean. You see the collagen fibers here? You see that? Here's another one. You can see the scales, three-dimensional preservation. And under the scales, you see the collagen fibers. Collagen fibers raise three-dimensional structure. They're not channels that are cut in there. These are from mosasaur, marine reptiles. It's not feathered. This is from the so-called feathered dinosaur you see here. This wavy structure here. They say that's a feathered dinosaur, protofeathers. Except that when you compare that with the decaying dolphin, it's the exact same structure. Look at that. This is just skin collagen. Here's another one, the so-called feathered dinosaur tail. Look at that. It does look heavy here until you look at the decayed dolphin. And we have the same structures. That is just decayed skin collagen. Very well preserved in the fossil, even under the microscope. This looks like feathers, right? This is actually from the marine reptile. It's just skin collagen. So to answer that question, these are not feathers at all. We have one side where you have dinosaur fossils with a fuzzy structure. Those are just decayed skin. And then you have the birds in the fossil record with real flight, asymmetrical flight feathers. And those are birds. Two very different classes. Here's an evolutionary expert. He says that they want to see feathers, so they see feathers. This is simply an exercise in wishful thinking. And Dr. Sawley, the one who did the experiment, says this. Scientists must now choose believe in the nebulous idea of proto-feathers or the reality of collagen, the dominant protein in vertebrates. He goes on to say in his textbook, he wrote a 2-volume graduate textbook to train doctoral students in this area. He said, I'm convinced from the nonsense spouted by many of the people who denounce collagen in favor of proto-feathers that they have never actually seen collagen in its natural decomposing state. What's interesting, in decayed collagen, there are 4 or 5 main forms. And every single one of those forms match known forms of decayed skin collagen. Yeah. I see a hand raised up here. No. Okay, I thought you were raising it. Okay. So did that answer your question about feathered dinosaurs? Okay. I have more slides, but yep, I know it's going on for a while. Anyone else? The talk, even earlier today, or this talk, or anything else about creation that maybe wasn't mentioned today? Yes, in the back.
That verse about the dinosaur with the cedar tree-like tail.
Yes.
What was that verse again?
Job chapter 40, verse 15.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go on and read that verse. So behemoth, the largest land creature that God created, has a tail like a cedar tree. Yep, so that's what it is. Yes.
There's a lot of information about creation in the book of Job. I mean, there's astronomy. Am I right about that? Am I remembering that right?
Yes, that's right. And Job is a big area of my research. I'm actually writing 2 papers on Job for theological journals that I hope to publish by the end of this year. One on who is Job and one on Leviathan as well. So yeah, that should be out by the end of this year. So there has been not a lot of research on Job in the literature, unfortunately. But yeah, we're doing something. I mean, in the liberal theologian literature, there has been some stuff about Job and all that, but very poorly done. So I'm hoping to make a difference with those 2 papers I'm publishing. Okay, talk about Job, something interesting. I was in a dialogue with somebody about Job earlier on. So we know Job lived after the flood. I'm writing a paper on Job suggesting that that we actually know who Job is. And that's interesting because Job is from the land of Uz. Lamentations chapter 4 verse 21 tells us Edom is in the land of Uz. Edom is Esau. Does that mean he's post-Abrahamic? Well, he has 4 friends, right? All the 4 friends come from cities in the land around the area of Edom. His first friend is Eliphaz, the Temanite. Very interesting because you go to Genesis 36, you have the genealogy of Esau. The genealogy of Esau, Esau's firstborn son is Eliphaz. Eliphaz's firstborn son is Teman, the founder of the Temanites. Is Eliphaz the Temanite Job's first friend, Esau's firstborn son? Another one of his friends, Bildad the Shuhite. Shuhite is from Shua. Well, Abraham, after Sarah died, married Keturah, their firstborn is Shua. So if you are Shuhite, you come from that line, traced back to Abraham. Elihu, the 4th friend, he's described as a Bazite from Baz and from Ram or Aram. Both lines can be traced back to Nahor, Abraham's brother. They're all post-Abrahamic. What's interesting that if you read the Bible, it tells you in the last verse that Job lived so and so years, died an old man full of days. Just ends there. But if you go to the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, it's not one line, it's an entire paragraph. And we know that this entire paragraph is not original, it's added in by a later editor. And we know that because it opens by saying, according to the Syriac text. So obviously this is a later editor portion that put that into the Greek text there. And say, according to the Syriac text, it tells you that Job is Jobab, J-O-B-A-B. Go back to Esau's genealogy, Jobab was the 2nd king of Edom. Very interesting. Jobab can be traced back to Esau's genealogy as well. He said he was the king of the area. He said the 4 friends are the kings of those following cities as well. He also identified that Eliphaz the Temanite is Esau's firstborn son. It says that Job, is the 5th generation from Abraham. So everything comes together. So that's the paper I'm trying to write. So if Job is a real individual, it's not a parable. It cannot be dismissed as a mere story. lived after the flood. If Job chapter 40 is talking about a real dinosaur, 5 generations after Abraham, there were still dinosaurs around. So, yeah, just giving you a little taste of what will become out there. But yeah. Anyone else? Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Joe. Well, again, I know the books are still out there. We'll be cleaning those up in just a few moments. But you got just a few minutes to do that before we put up what's left. So thank you for being here tonight. Brother Mike, you close us in a word of prayer, and then we will be dismissed.
Heavenly Father, we just give you praise and honor and glory. We just, there's so much for us to know, Lord. And so we pray for wisdom. We pray for understanding of your holy word and just how everything works together in this beautiful world that you've created for us. So, Lord, give us wisdom, give us understanding. We thank you for this evening, this time to learn more about creation and about you. And so, Lord, we just pray that you'd guide us in our steps this week. Give us those opportunities to serve you, and I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Thank you.